Hey everybody, Uncle Aaron here, CEO of My Mortgage Trainer. I am joined today by Jim Marchese, who is not only the CEO of MortgageNOW, Jim also has a doctorate in law. And today we're discussing what I like to refer to as the soup sandwich that we're all about to take a bite of in relation to the NAR settlements, and then this whole other piece that some of you may not be aware of, which is the DOJ side of things. And so Jim and I have been talking about this particular topic in length, and Jim has been nice enough to put together a little bit of a presentation to kind of explain to you how this is going to affect us moving forward, not just again from the NAR settlement side, but the DOJ side, which I wasn't even completely aware that this was the case. So, Jim, thanks for enlightening me. But, Jim, welcome to our little show here.
Thanks. Always a pleasure to see you, Aaron.
Appreciate you, brother. So, you know what? I'm just gonna we'll just do this pretty casual. I just want to kind of throw it at you, and just have you go, man. Just go
All
with
right.
it.
All right, Aaron. Thank you again. I'm going
Mhm.
to kind of give you a quick overview. I'm sure there's going to be a lot of questions, but ask you to hold them to the end, and then we'll field them out. So first, I want to start with the NAR settlement is a very interesting thing. It's been a lot of news, but what's not getting a lot of news right now is the Department of Justice, and that's the case in the United States versus NAR. And what that is that's essentially the FBI, the IRS, the whole national government looking at how realtors are compensated. And then you go to a second step, and then you've got the Burnett versus NAR case, which is the NAR settlement everyone's talking about. They're two totally distinct cases, two totally distinct matters. So I'm going to kind of hit both real quick, and really, how does it impact you as a loan officer? How does it impact banking, right? So first, right off the bat, why do we care as MLOs? Well, the NAR settlement is going to impact 100% of buyers agents. So if you're dealing with a buyer, you're dealing with a realtor, it's going to affect you. And it's going to affect at least 25% of licensed realtors right now. Why? Because it affects how they get paid. And that's really what matters. And it's also estimated that it's going to affect their income and drop their income as much as 50%. Some people see this as doom and gloom and the end of the buyer's realtor. I don't see it quite that way, but there are definitely some trepidation out there. And then also many believe that the buyer's agents are going to get circumvented and people are going to go right to the seller's agents to avoid paying fees. A lot of these are questions right now. They're not answers, but they're just things that are going on. So be aware of them when you talk to your agents. Just remember, for most of us, buyers agents are the number one source of business. And why is that so important? Well, if you've been out there for any time, you're getting calls right now. How are we in banking, or how is title going to make up their losses and loss of income? Well, first off, let's talk about what's going on. What is the news? What's the world saying? The world's saying, oh, the NAR settlements will lower home prices. That's not happening. Home prices are up 9.5% in New Jersey, 7.5% across the United States. And that just came out from Fannie Mae today. ABC News, selling homes is about to get cheaper. Home costs are going to fall. So all this is what I like to refer to as good old-fashioned fake news. Is it going to make it harder for first-time home buyers? Yes, it is. So what is it doing to the stocks and lead sources that are going on? Well, if you look at Zillow, for example, and I know we all have a love affair, hate with Zillow. Zillow's already dropped. I know, Aaron, you love them. Zillow's already dropped 30%. I personally think this is going to be a huge impact on Zillow because of a simple reason. If the buyers, realtors aren't making as much money, bankers aren't making as much money, the people that buy leads are not going to be buying as many Zillow leads, they're not going to be advertising. So just be aware, Zillow is changing its model. It's actually charging sellers more money to become premier listing agents. So they're really trying to shift their business model. But you're seeing a drop of almost 30% in their stock price just since the settlement's been announced. So DOJ NAR, what is basically the big hubbub about this? Well, all of us remember from high school the Sherman Antitrust Act. Remember Carnegie Steel versus Rockefeller, the whole railroad incident where they were price fixing steel? That's where this law comes from. It's the Sherman Antitrust Act, 15 USC 1. Do you need to know that? No. But if you listen to a YouTuber, you're talking to anybody, and they're offering you an opinion on the NAR settlement, and they don't know 15 USC 1, Turn them off. They don't know what they're talking about, because this is the crux of what's going on. This is the fight right now. And what is this law from? It's from 1890. And they use this law of basically three huge conglomerates fixing steel prices to affect hundreds of thousands of realtors and hundreds of thousands of loan officers. So what is the DOJ? The DOJ is the Department of Justice. This is your FBI. These are the people that come in and raid your house and try to stop terrorists, and hopefully you're probably going to edit this, Aaron, but they were the ones who were supposed to catch Epstein, but really accidentally turned his mic off so he could be killed in his cell. And it was not suicide. It was not suicide, guys. All right. So with that,
actually,
so the Department of Justice wants some things to no longer be legal, and a couple of things are really related around compensation. They want buyers to know what they're paying. Kind of seems fair to me. If I'm buying a house and I'm spending $20,000 for my buyer's agent, I should know what I'm spending. Don't think that's a big deal. So they're saying you can't hide it. In the old days, realtors would put it in a secret section in the MLS, so the buyer would never know what they're paying until they put in the offer. Not exactly fair. Understand why that's an issue. They also don't want realtors to say they work for free. I don't know anyone who said they work for free. It's actually stupid. In lawyers' terms, we call this a throwaway. Throwaways are great. You put something in there so you have like, oh, I can't just have one thing. I need like four. So we're going to put something totally irrelevant and stupid in there. Yes, you don't work for free. Congratulations, gentlemen. You just figured that out. The other thing is they're not allowed to use any type of software to suppress a listing to hide it. Now, I don't know a realtor who wants to list a home to get the highest value that hides the fact that they listed it. I think the whole point of the MLS is to get it out there. But again, I call these throwaways. The third and fourth are really about having access to homes. Not a big deal, not going to have a big effect on us. But if you want to look it up, it's at the Federal Registry, and I have the link below. So that's DOJ. That's the law. So anyone who tells you you have to do this because of the law, if it's not in those four items, it's not the law. The NRA settlement is different. That's a civil action. That's like if you slip and fall and you sue ShopRite and you guys come to an agreement on a settlement. Well, the NAR came to a settlement with the Burnett family, and the settlement happened to be $418 billion. And my brethren, the blood-sucking attorneys of the world, they get to keep about 200 million of it, and they give out like 5,000 to everybody else. So really, they're the big winners in this jackpot. And what is that settlement based upon? Two basic ideas. One, compensation cannot be hidden on the MLS. And two, you have to have a buyer's agreement before you take someone else. Number two is where the rubber meets the road. Number two is going to affect your lives, gentlemen and ladies. So be ready for what's about to hit. So what did they settle on? 107 pages. Every realtor was like, oh my God, it's 107 pages. I can't read it. There's only 7 things that affect them. The other 105 pages are about who gets paid and how the realtors, and how the lawyers are going to make sure they get paid and how they're going to distribute it and trust funds and everybody who's getting a little kickback in that nice settlement. So don't get too crazy.
The Paperwork Reduction Act, right? With 107 pages, but sorry.
No, I appreciate it. It's ridiculous, but it's a massive document. But really, the only sections we're going to worry about are sections F, paragraph 35s, 1 through 7. And there's literally 7 items that matter. 1, you cannot make a unilateral offer anymore as a realtor. So the seller can't say, I'm getting 3, buyer's getting 2. You got to negotiate it. I don't think that's a big deal. That's what they do all day. Prices, negotiation, it's part of business. And for MLOs, it's not a big deal because we have to always negotiate rate, closing costs. So we're very comfortable in that world. 2, they have to disclose their compensation at the earliest possible moment. Just like we have to disclose a loan and get it out there within a certain time period, usually 72 hours after application. Well, they're going to have to disclose what they're getting paid. Again, I don't think this is a big deal. They had to disclose it when they wrote a contract. Now they just have to do it a little bit faster. They have to train their agents not to violate the settlement. Really, that's a no-brainer. They can't say that their compensation is set by law. Don't know anyone who did that. I don't know anyone who even thought about doing that. Really, another one of those lawyers' throwaways. Like I said, they wanted 7 items, so they made up a couple. And you have to show a property regardless of compensation. This is a big one. So if the seller is saying, I am not paying any compensation to the buyer's agent, a buyer's agent still has to take them to that property. Very, very important, because that's going to affect every one of you on this line. Because who are they going to go to seek compensation? It's going to come from the buyer, or it's going to come from the LO? Well, guess what? I can guarantee you they're going to be calling us. All right. So what are they prohibited from doing in this settlement? Well, they can't hide or filter their technology, and they can't say they're free. Again, those two things, not a big deal, not going to affect us. So what's the agreement look like? And I'm going to blow through this real quick because this is their agreement, but you should be somewhat familiar with it because you're going to want a copy. Every single time you set up to send out a pre-qual, you're going to want this copy because you're going to need to know the rules of the game. And the rules of the game are going to be, well, they can listed in a specific area, a very small area, or they can, meaning the buyer's realtor can say, I want the whole state. This happens to be New Jersey for them, so it'd be the whole state of New Jersey. Places like California, that's gonna be a little tougher. Texas, a little tougher, but you're gonna limit it to counties, areas, geographic areas. This is a contract, has to have defined borders. So just keep that in mind. And that's a good thing for us because then you know that the buyer's agent, if they refer it over, you've got a whole area of the state covered for a prerequisite amount of time. And this is important. You want to put this in your calendar. If your buyer's agent locks somebody down for 6 months, you want to stay on that borrower, keep them active for 6 months, because after 6 months, they're gone, they're with another agent, and guess what? You're most likely going to lose that pre-qual. You wasted all that time and money. So their time frame does matter, and everyone's going to be different. So some people are going to try to lock down for a year, 2 years, 3 years, 6 months. Some may lock for 3 days. Know what the time frame is because it will impact your business. Now, so how is this going to impact your business? Well, one, your buyer is only going to have one realtor. So that's good in your world because they're not going to go to another realtor and get referred to another lender. I like that. Two, it's going to impact the number of clients the realtor takes out. So if they can't get someone to sign a form, there's no pre-qual. They can't take them to see a house. That's going to impact us. How many people get a call, give me a pre-qual, they take the client out, and they meet them there for the first time. They're going to have to do this before they actually go see the house. So that's going to impact the number of clients. So you make sure to spend a little extra time with each client when you get them because you're not going to have as many. And then the other thing is you're going to have to help them in showing their value, meaning if you get a realtor and they've got a client and they're waffling, I don't know if I want to sign this buyer's agreement. You're going to have to help explain why that realtor really makes a difference and why they should go with that realtor versus somebody else and why they may ultimately end up paying that realtor out of pocket instead of someone else. So you want to really sell their value and of course your value. And I know everyone knows how to sell their own value, but selling someone else is a little tougher. So you want to spend some time with your realtors, really sit down, ask them what their thought process is, what value they're going to bring, how they're going to help so that you're really giving a nice presentation on their behalf. The other thing that's going to happen is your broker's compensation may be at odds as a realtor. If you're a broker and you're getting paid by the borrower paid compensation, and the realtors, buyer paid compensation, you have two sets of compensation set by the buyer. That means if you're 2% and they're 2%, the buyer is spending 4%, 400 basis points on their purchase price to buy a home. That's not to their value. That means you're going to have to underwrite it and some other things are going to get really, really complicated. Now, second is you have to be aware of that exclusivity agreement because if you're going to lose your time frame and it's not going to work and they go off to another agent, you could be spinning your wheels. So make sure you know who you're working with and time frames. Now, the part that everyone's getting used to is this section, and it's the section regarding compensation. So you've got buyer's agents who can literally go fee for service. $500, I go see 5 houses. I can do that. $500, I go see 5 houses and I get 2% on the buy. They can do that. But if the buyer agrees in this section to pay them this amount, they're paying them this amount out of pocket if there's no seller's concession or if there's no seller's credit. They're contractually obligated. So what does that mean?
Can I stop you there for a second? They can have both of those, right? Like there could be a, can you go back one?
Yep.
So they can have, this is not an either or, right? There can be a retainer fee and a broker commission, correct?
Yes.
Because
yes.
I'm thinking of this, I don't know, when you said it earlier about it could be the whole state or what have you, right? And you've got to show houses that maybe aren't even paying any compensation to the buyer side. Then I don't know why, but I get this picture in my head of a real estate agent when a client wants to go look at one of those homes that aren't paying, right? Like letting them know that their car's in the shop, so feel free to come pick me up as your realtor.
Yep.
Or otherwise a retainer fee. I might also call that a fuel tax.
Yep.
Up front.
Agreed.
before we get to broker commissions. Am I on the right track?
You're dead on, and that's
Okay.
very astute. And
Okay.
there will be a model where people will say, "Listen, I'll take you out to see a house for $500, and I'll take you to 10 homes for that." And that is a fuel tax. So you are absolutely correct.
Okay.
You're going to see all types of crazy models based upon this, I'm sure. So what does that mean to us as loan officers? Well, for one, we're in a situation now where we're going to be stuck with the terms of that buyer's agent's contract. So if the buyer's paying 2%, you better find enough funds for them to close on that loan if there's no seller's compensation. So you're going to see them lose clients to others based upon price. The questions right now are, is there going to be a race to the bottom? Everyone remembers Foxtons in 2007, 2% listings. They went bankrupt. 3,500 agents ended up losing their jobs. Is this become fee for service transaction? Someone gives $500, I'll take you out, and puts billboards everywhere, takes out 1,000 agents, makes $500,000 a year, just taking people around to see houses, doesn't care. That's maybe a viable model for somebody. So just kind of be aware of what's going on, because it's going to affect you. And just remember, if it's a fee for service, it's going to be added to closing costs unless the seller credits in a seller's credit or closing credit. I'm sorry, seller's concession or agreement to pay buyer's agent. So what do we also, is this, why do we say 25%? Where did I come up with 25% of transactions are going to be affected? Well, your FHA, VA are definitely going to be impacted. Limited amount of money down, you're going to have tighter appraisals, they're going to be tough. Investment properties, you're looking at 6 months reserves needed for most of them. Well, if you're using 2% to pay your realtor, that's 2% less you have for the reserves. Also, broker's compensation. If you're, again, borrower paid, that means that if you have borrower paid for the real estate agent and borrower paid for the loan officer, 4% of the money is going other places than the house, and that's going to be a tough sell. So the other section, what is business as usual? Business as usual is the seller pays the compensation for the buyer. Pretty standard stuff. Is that going to continue? Yes, it is. The only real difference here is they cannot hide what they're paying on the MLS. They have to be honest about it. I'm a seller's agent. Now I'm going to sign a listing agent for 2%, and I'm going to offer zero, goose egg, nothing for the buyer's agent. What's that mean? If you want to come buy my house, you're taking it all out of pocket. If there's a flood of homes on the market, is this a big deal? No. But right now, there's roughly 8 buyers for every home. So if I'm selling $1 million house, I'm not paying buyer's agent. I'm going to take a 2%, keep the other 3 in my pocket, and I'm going to take that to the bank because there's so many buyers out there. So this is the big worry, right? Now, they're also going to have to check one of these boxes. And the interesting thing is, if you look at the boxes, what it really says is you're going to pay me no matter what. I'm not going to take you to certain houses if I'm not getting paid. I'll accept as the buyer's agent whatever the seller's offering, which means if I take you to a house, put in an offer, and they say zero, goose egg, nothing, means you're stuck with it as buyer's agent. Literally don't get paid. That's a problem, right? And then you could just say, I'm going to negotiate it. I'm a big fan of negotiating. So when the buyer's agents put their offers in, they negotiate their commission at that time. That to me is the best way to go about it. So how is this going to ultimately impact you? Because you're like, I'm not a realtor. What does that matter to me? Here's where it matters. Okay. In the real world of banking, we're going to go the middle column. Seller pays 2.5%, agrees to pay the buyer's agent 2.5%. What's it look like? $500,000 purchase. Everyone knows these numbers, pretty standard, pretty easy. Buyer's agent gets $12,500. Seller gives them a credit of $12,500. They're about $113,000 to the table with closing costs, right? Really easy stuff. But now let's get complicated. Seller's agent agrees to pay 2.5%, but the buyer's agent agreed to accept 1%. What happens? You don't get to up your negotiation. You don't get to take the extra money. The buyer's agent gets $5,000. The closing credit by the seller has to be the difference, that extra 1.5. So they're paying 1% to the buyer's agent, 1.5 goes to a closing credit. So what's that mean? It means they're going to bring less to the table. You're looking at a normal transaction, $113,000. Here you're looking at $105,000. Think about that. If you're going out with a buyer's agent, are you going to accept 2.5% commission on the front end when you could save yourself $7,500? And this is the reason why Zillow stock's down. This is the reason why every realtor is in panic mode right now. Because why would you accept 2.5 as a buyer when you can just say 1? And if you could find someone to take you out for 1, well, why wouldn't you do that? Well, you're going to have, that's where that value proposition comes. That's where you're going to have to help your realtor. You're going to have to explain that your realtor is aggressive. They're going to find a house that's newly listed and get an offer, get the house taken off the market instead of having it out there in an open house. You're going to have to explain that this realtor has better pull through, has connections that are going to help with home inspections. They're going to really make sure that you find your dream home. I use a joke, and you may want to cut this, Aaron. You may not want to. I'm kind of stealing it off of TV.
Bring it.
So you ever see the commercials? Sushi's good, cheap is good. You know, cheap sushi is not good, or gas stations are good, sushi's good. Yeah, you don't want that, right?
Gas station sushi is a no. Yeah,
it's a no, right? It's a definite no. Well, with that said, you don't want a cheap realtor. You're spending $500,000 for a house. That extra 1-2% could be the difference between getting a nightmare and a beautiful home. So you get what you pay for, and you want to remind the clients that when they're talking to the realtor that if you're paying $500 for a realtor, you're going to get what you're paying for, and that may be a $500,000 nightmare. And that's one of the things that we're teaching our people, right? So now what happens on column 3? And this is another one that's going to light your world up. I guarantee this one's going to happen. Seller agent says, I'll accept your offer, but I'm only paying 1.5% to the buyer. But the buyer's agent agreed to 2.5%. So what do you say? Oh, too bad, so sad. You just lost 1% or $5,000. You're going to tell your buyer's agent, who refers you 10 deals a year, so you're going to lose $60,000 if you refer me 10 deals like this. Probably not. It's going to be a hard conversation, right? So let's go through the same scenario. Everything looks the same. Everything looks the same except, oh, right here, $18,225,000 in closing costs. Closing costs go up. What's that mean? You're going to have to underwrite that sucker. You're going to have to know what's going on. And what that means is the seller is going to give a $7,500 credit. But who's giving the other $5,000? I can guarantee you're going to get a call and say, hey, I need 1.25%. I need $5,000. Can you give a lender's credit for 1.25%? That's going to depend on who you work with, what your institution is. Now, the weird part is about this is you're like, but wait a minute, I'm only losing 1% from the seller to the buyer. Why is it costing me 1.25? Because sellers' commissions, buyers' commissions for realtors are based upon the purchase price. Our points are based upon the loan amount. So in other words, if they're giving away a point, you're giving away 1.25%, assuming this scenario. So it's going to hurt us a lot more than it's going to hurt them. And also, most institutions I know of don't build an extra 150 basis points in or 125 just for, oh, we got to cover realtors' commission. If you do, that's going to drive rates up. Now, if you do not give them a lender's credit, what's going to happen is you're going to say to your buyer, you're bringing, in this case, $118,000. So everyone sees this 113 right here. If you do not give this $5,000 credit right here, you're going to be adding that to the 113. That's 118,000. So I'm a buyer. I agree to 1%. I could be bringing anywhere from 105,000 or 118,000. Not a fun conversation, and you're in my world. I don't like to have conversations where I'm off by $13,000, $14,000 in the world. So that's something you want to be aware of. Buyer's agreements up front.
You know, with margins so thin right now already, Jim, I mean, I see a situation there where that's going to be hard to come by. That's going to be a situation where, you know, you're going to have that tough conversation, or the agent is, with the borrower. Like, you're going to need to bring $5,000 more, you know, or because you're basically going to hit that ball right back into the realtor's court. You know, he's the one playing hardball here. And then that puts you in a weird situation with your real estate referral partner too. Right? Like, we don't have the spread to be able to credit you this money, but that your agent could reduce the price to the amount that the seller agreed to pay. That could be reworked. And now we're in, like I said, now we're in some murky waters with our referral partners.
And that's and Aaron, and that's why this is so important for everyone to get their arms around. And when I said things like brokers' compensation is going to be an issue, brokers can accept 2 on the back or up to 3, but they have to agree to that for a 6-month period. Well, if I've agreed to 2 and I have to give a 1.25 credit, I'm making nothing. 75 basis points. That doesn't cover the office, the loan officer, the process. No, there's a huge problem there.
And when you're saying broker, you are meaning mortgage broker in that scenario, right?
Mortgage broker, yes.
Okay,
Apologize.
yeah.
Yes,
Okay.
absolutely. So when you say mortgage broker compensation, you either get paid by the borrower,
Right.
or you get paid yield spread.
Right.
If you put 3% in the back right now on yield spread for broker mortgage compensation, your rates are outrageous.
You're so far out of market, you're not going to get any of this business anyway.
Right. So now you're going in, and most people I know are pitching 2 to 2.5 on front. Well, now you're going to have to give half of it away if you're in scenario 3, and that's kind of scary. So that's why I say you want to have that buyer's agreement up front. So here's some tips to overcome this. One, make sure you have the buyer's agreement up front. You're going to know what you're dealing with. Make sure you qualify that buyer and assume they have to bring the money to the table. And if they don't, make sure you could finance it in the loan. That's really important, because if you do those two, you can just raise the loan amount a little bit. You could play a little right or left. There's some room to really get through this. But you want to make sure that you have ability to finance or cover the closing credit with yield, right? 2, this is my favorite approach. Get a seller's concession. They put in an offer for 500. Don't put in an offer for 500. Your agent should be putting it in for 510 with a 2.5% credit for closing. Really simple. No problem. Now their 10,000's covered. Everything stays about the same. What's the downside in that? Well, one, you might have an appraisal issue. I don't know if the house will appraise for the 510. In this market, you should be okay. Most appraisals are coming in pretty good or above. 2, you're complicating the transaction. You want to have this conversation when the offer goes in. You do not want to have 2 attorneys on the phone and tell them to amend the contract to increase the price. They've actually been sent letters from the ethics board saying they're not allowed to raise home prices to include a concession after the contract has been signed. You can do it in offer, but you're not supposed to do it after attorney review starts. And in some states, you don't have attorney review. So that's a big one.
Why does Nehemiah come to mind here? The old days of the down payment assistance, where we're raising the price in order to cover the difference.
Yep.
They did away with that because that had a negative impact on the borrowers. Plus, we're already in a market where, we have, insane valuations on these properties to begin with. So if now and I understand what we're saying here, but like, we might have to go to this route, but all that's doing is artificially inflating prices even more. So
you're 100% correct. The thing about how funny is this is supposed to bring prices down. Remember that second slide,
right.
Home prices will fall. No, this is going to bring prices
down. It's going to raise them. I really, honestly, I hope this isn't quite the soup sandwich that we're saying that it is. Maybe it's a big nothing burger, and the agents are talking on the side saying, look, this may be the way, they want it to go. But the reality of it is they left us the ability to negotiate. We just have to disclose up front, nothing really different. So most of my sellers, I'm going to be saying, look, you want the largest pool of potential buyers, you should be willing to pay a 2% or whatever it is, buyer's agency fee on top of what you're going to pay me.
And Aaron, that's
I hope.
No, that's exactly what's happening. So I've presented to over 250 realtors and about 7 to 10 different offices at this point across the country. We lend everywhere from California to New Jersey. So exactly what you're saying is what the brokers are saying. And I mean real estate brokers. So the real estate brokers are saying, we are going to tell every one of our buyers to add 2% for a seller's agent. Why? Because they all have buyer's agents in their office. Could you imagine? I have 100 agents, 50% are buyers, 50% are sellers. I'm like, we're not going to put anything on for the buyers. I'm an agent. I'm leaving them. Because remember, these guys are independent contractors. These girls can go wherever they want. It's not like loan officers where your license is dependent upon the bank, where the bank makes you an employee. They're independent contractors. They can literally break their contract and move one door down in 5 minutes. It's really easy to do. So they definitely hold their brokers. The real estate agents hold the real estate brokers hostage.
Right.
in certain respect.
Right.
So just remember, the key to this whole game is make sure they have enough funds to cover the commission, whether it's in the financing or it's in the funds they have to close.
Right.
And remember, funds are fungible. So it doesn't matter whether it's a mortgage, whether it's their cash, none of that matters. Seller's credit, as long as you get to the end solution, you win. So now I have heard up and down the internet, you're not going to be able to, this is the famous one, Aaron, this is the best. You're not going to be able to finance any type of loan commissions for realtors in the mortgage. Well, that doesn't make any sense. The only way you don't do that is if it's cash. Whether I put 20%, 40%, 30% down, if I'm paying 2% to the realtor, money's fungible. How do you know whether it was the mortgage that paid the 2% commission or my mortgage that paid? So Fannie Mae and Freddie Mac came out and they said, look, you can get a seller's concession for anywhere from 2 to 9%, depending on the program. We don't care. Finance it. So that's some really good news. So when you walk in and all your agents are petrified of what's going on, walk them with a smile and say, listen, I got your back. We're gonna get you a concession, but make sure you put it in, be smart with your offer. If you were gonna offer 490, offer 500 with that 2.5% seller's concession in there. Okay, be smart about it. Play a little bit with the numbers and make sure when you talk to your MLO that they have the funds to close. And so what's nice about this, the positive in our world is this: they've always needed us, but they're really going to need us now. They're going to rely on you to make sure these numbers work. So no more just, hey, do a soft pull, send it out. That's not going to work in this market. Hard pull, make sure you know what you're looking at. Make sure you've done all your numbers for especially FHA, VA, or anyone who's in a bidding war. You do not want to end up in a situation where you blow your realtor's relationship. So last slide, and I really appreciate everyone letting me go on for a little bit. Buyer's compensation will be an issue 25% of the deals. That's my prediction. Could be a little bit more. Right now, we estimate that 7 to 8% of transactions are buyers going directly to sellers agents at an open house or otherwise. We believe that number is going to at least be 25, maybe a little bit more depending on how it works. We believe that there's going to be some issues with underwriting because how are you going to handle it if they need more funds to close? Has to go back to underwriting. So that's going to delay some closings. It's going to create some animosity. Give your realtors a heads up. Their compensation, their agreement, you need to have it well before you get into underwriting because it is going to determine a lot of underwriting, especially FHA, VA. Also, you're going to have to ask your compliance department. If a realtor says I'm getting paid $5,000 from the buyer, no seller's compensation, do you have to disclose it? It's a good question. I don't think anyone actually knows the answer to that. Do you have to disclose the attorney when you disclose the loan? Most of us do. Do you really have to? Probably not. But do you want to get dinged by Department of Banking because you didn't disclose a potential fee? No, I'm a no risk type person. So I don't know how you're going to handle this. You need to talk to your individual institutions to ask them how they want to handle it, but get it in writing. Because I can guarantee you this is going to be a hotbed for the CFPB, who's already complaining that there's too many fees and mortgages. Also, like I said before, proof of funds for the buyer. Make sure you have proof of funds because if you do not know what the buyer is paying, you do not know what the commission is, you're going to need to see those numbers and they're going to go down most likely. So it's going to have an effect. And that's going to put pressure on you, on me, and all the other banking and title people out there because realtors are going to be looking for a way to cover losses. I don't see any other way about it. I don't see these guys who are driving in their Mercedes are going to be like, oh, I'm going to go drive an Ugo or a Genesis and give up my Mercedes. They're going to be knocking on our doors. Also, like I said, bank margins are probably going to go up. Rates are going to go up or fees are going to go up to cover the realtors' commissions. That's my prediction. You know, it's just going to be more expensive. Every time the government gets involved, it makes things worse. I forget, was it Ronald Reagan said, if the government says I can solve your problem, run. Is that I think Ronnie said that. So I've never seen the government get involved and things get cheaper. And finally, like I said before, if you're a broker, you really want to spend some time because come July, you want to know how you're paid and how this is going to work, how you're going to disclose these things and how you're going to work if you need a credit. If you're with a big bank, you're going to want to know those things too, because that's, you know, they're very intolerant of change. right? And the third thing is, if you're working for somebody who's like a franchise style P&L, you want to know your margins, because you're going to struggle if you have to start giving credit. If you've got a margin for the bank, margin for the branch, for the bank, for the branch manager, and then you go up and there's 4 or 5 people biting at that apple. That's going to be a big deal. So you know, you want to keep track of these things. So predictions are, for the next 12 to 24 months, this is going to be a struggle for all of us. But you've got some good tools, and I'm sure you're going to do great. And with Aaron guiding you through your CEs, things should be a lot of fun here. And don't worry about it. All right, guys. Thank you again.
Yeah, right on. Hey, I appreciate the time, Jim. Very interesting bit of information. And, you know, I think all of us are, you know, I don't know. I think a lot of people are in wait and see mode, but at the same token, you know, you have to get ahead of this, right? So this is good information. And I think that this is also, I don't know, maybe you and I should talk a little bit more about maybe creating some additional content that we could share with the MLOs, because I think there's a real opportunity for them to use this to go out and talk to their real estate agents and explain to them how they probably ought to work this into their presentation as they're working with their buyers or their listers or whatever it might be. So I don't know, maybe you and I can have a separate conversation about that. Would you be willing to do that with me?
I'd love to. I think it'd be a lot of fun. And also, I was, you know, along those same lines, you know, we can give them some comments. So when they're content, so when they're talking to,
Right.
you know, on their YouTube, on their social media pages, they can talk to buyers, you know, how to handle this and how to create referrals out of this.
Right.
Because look, if you're a bank and you're willing to really work with the buyer's agent hand in hand, you know, there's going to be a lot of opportunity for MLOs who take advantage of this, because there's going to be an opening left in the market. So I think you're right on the right track.
Right. Right on. Well, again, thank you very much. I'm going to go ahead and hit stop here and get back to what we were doing. So thanks again, Jim.
Thank you. Take care, everyone. God bless.